Okay, so do we have a motion? As I guess I tracked by a message.
I make a motion to pay the $10,000 to Julian Equipment for the anti-icing pre-treatment equipment.
I second the motion.
You said it wrong.
$10,000.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second.
I'm
All in
excited.
favor?
Aye.
It should be exciting.
Pre-treatment.
Okay, then the other thing, and Arin might be able to give us some input on this because this is her area of expertise.
Pre-treated.
We
We're
have,
excited about the equipment over there.
yeah, they are. This is pretty exciting. We have a complaint by one of the business owners on 18 about a piece of property, and we've known for a while it was an issue, but apparently it's just getting worse. And he is concerned. Barry sent that complaint the other day. The full color pictures kind of get a little bit better. I know one of the other business owners is also concerned. We knew we were joint planning. We also knew that Arin would probably have some input on that. And so the one that had talked to me, he has also talked to Arin, not specifically about this, but, so knew that was coming. And so we were kind of in a little waiting pattern knowing this was up, but we probably want to look at this, or
Is it a wall or
it's actually a building.
the whole building?
It is. It's the whole building. I'm going to show that to her. The complaint says the building is collapsing and the person is concerned it may fall onto his property. So the past couple of weeks, the roof has collapsed and another section of the wall at the back of the building along the alley between their property has also fallen. I know that they've researched, they know the owner.
Do they have a shared wall?
I don't believe so. Do you?
I don't think it's the one I've seen, and I don't think it's the
They don't share a wall?
No.
Okay, that's good. That's
But-
usually a problem too.
Did we go in and board them windows up? Is that the same building?
This is not that building.
Okay.
So, from what I remember, Galveston actually established the unsafe building ordinance, and it actually runs through the planning commission, not the council. Is that
Right.
okay?
Correct.
So, what it is basically there's notification by state law, but you have to notify them and give them. It's a minimum of 10 days to come up with a plan or do something, and then you have a hearing on that. And then there is a line item in the state code that you can do emergency action if you feel like you need to go in there and do it now. And then you have kind of the process after the emergency one, like obviously the roof's in, it looks like some walls are shifting, different things like that. So there's some options. At the end of the day though, if they don't do it, that's on your dime. So I guess that's always, in the smaller communities that I work with, is always the real issue is, do we have the funds to tear that down? Or do we, if it's not a shared wall, there's not as much concern, and maybe you have equipment that can go push it all over and at least it's in a pile that you can then get cleaned up later or something like that. So I guess it depends at what level do you think you have funds to do it or have personnel to do it, is kind of my first question, and then there's different ways of going about that. So that's typically what we look at is, yes, it's obviously unsafe, the roof is falling in. I know that we had previously had an agreement with you guys to have our building inspector come out and do a report if you wanted. At that time, we were doing it $50 just as a inspection fee, just gas basically to and from. And then they write a report, and but the planning commission still has to hear it and still has to say, yes, we want to do X The issue I have with that for you guys, I don't know your budgets and stuff like that. Planning Commission, I'm assuming, doesn't have a line item budget to go demo buildings.
Right.
So even though they're the ones that are saying yes or no to doing that, they would have to come before you to get funding.
Our conversation, and this is from my staff with the planning commission, is that the planning commission does not believe it's part of their scope.
There's an ordinance that actually is adopted by the town that says the planning commission is the one that does that. That was done when Jeff was your attorney. So I don't know what years those were, but if you want to look back in your ordinances,
I'll look tomorrow.
yeah, that would have been about the time as when Jeff Stanton was your attorney. So yes, it doesn't sound like a planning thing, but we took it on, and then every other community that put it in place had planning commission as the enforcement body, because you have to assign an enforcement body. So,
Okay.
I'm assuming that's why planning commission got it. But anyway, so I would look at that ordinance. It should be set up based off state code. So state code is what you'll have to go by on the letters. We do have templates. I'm willing to help you and send it to you of templates that you would send out and those type of things. You just change who it's from and the address and those type of things. But I think what comes down to is that planning commission would have to say, yes, it's unsafe. You have a certain amount of days to take care of this demo, whatever, and come to you guys, ask for funds. Or Walton has some people in town that go board up and do a few smaller things. I don't know if this is small, but so it kind of up to you guys on whether that's something that you could at least push into a pile so it's not going to fall into the right of way or fall into someone's building or whatever like that.
So you're saying we need to defer this to planning, just based on what our ordinance
Yeah.
says?
Yes.
So why don't I just pass this down to you, because the
I'm
pictures.
supposed to meet with them at 7:00 tonight.
Okay,
Yeah, so there is an ordinance out there, like I said. It was during Jeff Stanton's time, so I don't know.
I know we've seen it when we worked on some things before, but,
Yeah.
okay. All right,
Well, I don't have much time then if you're leaving at 7.
well, he's leaving us out. Rest of us are.
We can stay longer.
I've already told them to plan on you taking some time.
Okay. And this is not actually totally done either, so. Obviously, this is a draft. I don't know, how to start it. So, one of the reasons is everybody has a different level of knowledge of planning. So that's kind of why I'm not sure where to start with it. So I'll just give you a little history, a little understanding of planning, and then we can jump into some of the ordinance stuff. So obviously, you guys have talked to us before this town council actually about helping. We used to actually regulate Galveston in the 80s. And so we have some of that knowledge, but we also do Walton. So not that you guys are the same community, but we also have done some smaller town planning. So after you guys talked to me, we sat down, Cindy and Sunny, and I just wanted to understand, and I know that they're not going to be the representative of the whole town, but it's better than me coming and driving through your town and figuring out what I think you guys want, right? Someone that actually lives in the community. So we sat down and I just went through the ordinance with them to understand, the community a little bit better, and do these things fit it? Do we need to make some different changes? But in general terms, that's where I came up with these changes that we'll go over. With that being said, we would operate as an area planning commission. So you currently operate as an advisory planning commission. And so there's a few different things that you currently are allowed to do, or processes that you do that wouldn't be exactly the same when we take it over. The reasoning is that an area plan is the county and one municipality. It can be multiple municipalities, but to start an area, it's the county and one municipality. What that does is combine joint efforts together, and that was the way that we felt like we could take on Galveston, because we wouldn't have 3 additional meetings, we wouldn't have, some of the things that would come with doing that. With that, we would be putting all of your standards in the county ordinance, so it would become one ordinance for you and for the county put together. Now, with that being said, I've kind of talked about this before, that doesn't mean that you have to adopt everything that the county says. You're still your own town council, you're still your own town, so if there's something in here that you say, I don't want that use allowed in my community, you can always say no, even if the planning commission that will be established states that we would like that to happen in Galveston. You as town council still have the right to say no, you don't want that. So you don't lose the power in that sense. You lose more of the power in the sense that staff's going to be reviewing it, and it's a planning commission made up of you and county members. So it won't just be Galveston planning commission people. There'll be a mixture of, and then so that will have to come first. But what I wanted to make sure is that before we went that route, that we kind of had an ordinance, because what I've seen in other communities is that they say, yeah, we're gonna come together and we have this planning commission, and then it's a year later before they have an ordinance, because now they're working through all the details of that. And I would rather have something almost ready to go as we become one, so that there's not confusion on our end of, well, what ordinance are we supposed to look at? Do you have this information? Do you the back and forth a lot. So just to go ahead and have something kind of made up. So, I realized that I didn't put draft on every page after I printed it. As you can see, it's pretty lengthy. And I also didn't put page numbers. So I apologize in advance for that, but this is just the draft, as I said. So if you just go through it, the first table of contents, and why this says Unified Development Ordinance is that your subdivision ordinance will also be included in this ordinance. So it'll be County Galveston, zoning ordinance, and subdivision. So there'll be basically one book that everybody will have to go to. There won't be multiple books out there that we would have to go find. What that helps is definition-wise, or if there's ever a reference to the subdivision ordinance, we don't have to go find a different book. It's all together. So that's a little different as well, because you currently, I don't know if you know that you have a subdivision, but there should be a subdivision ordinance out there. I don't know that I might have it in my stuff. I mostly looked at the zoning, but anyway. So it would come together and be combined together. The first part is just basically establishing basic provisions. So that's saying, like, what do we do? What's your authority? What is this area plan commission covering? It goes into fee schedules, which that'll be something that we'll have to adopt as well. I don't know if you guys currently have fee schedules for your permits and those type of things that.
There is.
Okay, and so I got the ordinance book, but I don't know if the fee schedules are in there. So that might be something that we want to look at. We can always have a different fee schedule for Galveston than there is for county, if we need to.
Arin, I thought though, we said the fee schedule at this point, actually, those are charged by the county though, with this, right? Because it pays for the staffing?
Right, so it will be that way.
Okay.
So, but there will also be some discussion. So there'll be some discussion between that new planning commission to say, okay, you used to only charge $20, but we charge $100. Let's say that we bump it up to $50 or $75 right now. That money will be collected and we will keep, but we can still establish different fees depending upon the jurisdiction. Okay. Then who's the administrator for this document, which would obviously be my department. And then it goes into how we define the different zoning districts, and I realize that I've been going off the map, but that I didn't approve that tonight. So I will forward you the map so that you guys can compare it to what you're looking at and what areas we're talking about. And then non-conforming. So for that information, I'll just go over really quick, and I will tell you not what page, but like the number, section number here in a minute. So 116, if you want to look at it. It talks about non-conforming. So what this is there's legal and non-legal. So as we adopt this ordinance, whatever was allowed previously is a legal non-conforming. So basically they can operate how they're operating, there's no problem. Even if our ordinance says that they can't do it now, they can continue to do it. What it gives us the option to do is say, it closes down for 12 months or something like that, we relook at it and we say, is this something that we still want to happen in this neighborhood or in this area? But just adopting this does not change that for them. They would have to close for a certain amount of time for it to actually say, okay, now it's considered illegal, non-conforming, and so we want to relook at that.
So,
Yeah.
so what you're saying is they're grandfathered into what they're doing.
Yes, today, right. If they would shut down for a certain amount of time, or if like a setback, like we're changing a setback in here, but they have a garage that's set really close to the line, that garage gets to stay where it is. If there's a fire and that garage is taken out, then they have to meet the new standards. So just for that understanding. So that's what that non-conforming section talks about. It just defines for us like uses and setbacks and heights and those type of things that are established before this ordinance can stay that way unless they're removed or gone, destroyed, then they would have to meet the new standard. Okay. So Article 2, you'll see a lot of stuff in here. Some of it's not going to pertain to you because, again, this is combined. So we basically, in this Article 2, made districts just for Galveston. So R1, suburban residential, sorry, I haven't changed this. Nope, it's down. SR, which is actually gonna be suburban residential. I forgot to change it on this sheet. But SR, suburban residential, NR, neighborhood residential, TC, town center, CB, community business, and OS, open space. So those ones at the bottom are kind of your zoning districts. The rest of them, you could, if you like the zoning district, let's say there's one that we come through and we decide to rezone it to commercial and an industrial business comes in and you guys want that industrial business and it really fits in I-1, but that wasn't really for Galveston. Because you're in this whole ordinance, you would be able to still use that zoning district. So you could rezone that property to any of these that are on this list. What I did is I just established Galveston based off what Galveston kind of is today. That doesn't mean it can't change zoning districts as things evolve. And it could do any of these districts that are on this list. So with that being said, I would like to just jump to your guys' section, which would be up here to say SR. See, I changed it here, suburban residential. And so what this does, and I don't have all these fixed yet, but what we'll have is these 2 pages. Of SR. So one will show the uses that are allowed in that district. You know, this is more of your single family homes, small, maybe professional office that works in there. Co-locates for a wireless facility. So like, you know, if they put it on a pole that's already existing. And then there's some special exceptions. So to explain planning a little bit, there's uses that are permitted as right. So you're allowed to do that. Were you guys able to find it? I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Okay. Able to do, those are the permitted uses. So someone comes in and says, I want to do that there. We say, yep, that's allowed there. Or, hey, we're trying to sell this property. What all can they do? What we do is we print off this page for them. That's not every single use that's allowed. This is just a general, so realtors know, or someone interested in the property know. On the very back pages, you'll see this. This is actually every single use that we allow in every single district. What we found is that this is a helpful guide for anybody that's looking to purchase property or a realtor or anybody like that to have a general idea of what kind of uses we want to see in that district, okay? So some of your districts I haven't gone through and made this page for them, and you'll see that they're in red still. But that's what would happen. And then the next page this one establishes all of your setbacks and width of the property if you're gonna subdivide any, which we've kind of said there's not really a lot of lots in town maybe that we could subdivide, but if we ever annexed or worked with developers, we could rezone it because again, this is in the county district as well. So if there was some land that you were working with a developer that's outside of the town, but it's really gonna impact the town, we could rezone it to something that's similar to whatever district they're right by. So if we're by SR, we could rezone that agricultural to SR so it fits more with the character of Galveston. So I think it kind of helps being in that county because we can use all the districts because we're not just in one jurisdiction. So here we have height. This is our typical height, 35 feet in any district. That's just typical of what we use. The setbacks from primary structure to accessory or primary to primary, those are actually building codes on the 10 feet. I actually go in here and do primary to primary as the side yard setback because a lot of times if they're building on one lot and have two homes, sometime 50 years, 100 years from now, they want to split that other home and get rid of it. It was for my mom at the time, but now I don't want it. And they usually want to split the property. Well, I split it so that it can still meet our setback requirements. So that's why it's 20 feet. But so you know when you're looking through this, 10 feet is the minimum for building code unless you do a firewall. So that's why they have little stars by them. If less, it would need to have a firewall, basically. So you could even go smaller than that. Then sewer or without sewer. Obviously, again, you're going to be hooking up in town. But if we decided to do a district right outside of town, there would be standards that they would meet. We kind of looked at different lots in town and determined setbacks and side yard setbacks and rear yard and front yard setbacks based off a lot of different lots. SR, so just looking at this is kind of the, what's your subdivision called? Cindy?
Broad acres.
Yeah, so the SR is more of that area. So it has a little more lot, a little more setback, just because of that area. Then if you go to NR, again, you're going to see the uses that we have, and you're going to see that the setbacks in that area and the lot coverage in that area is a little more dense because in R, it's your neighborhood around downtown or your neighborhood, and I say the old part, but it's not really the old part, but more of the northern, eastern area. And so those lots are smaller. So we want to have less of a setback for them, less or more of lot coverage that they could do just because of the size of the lots. Then you go to TC, which is the next one, town center. That's your downtown. We did have discussion, and when we look at the map, we can have more discussion about how we want to move those lines around. But we basically took in most of downtown and then a few things that are outside of town that are more industrial uses now, but would be more appropriate to be commercial. Again, they're grandfathered in how they are now. So, but the next person that owns it, what do we want to see come of those properties? So that we zone them TC. So here you can see that the black is what I got to. The red is I still need to fix what is in this. But when we go over the matrix, it is correct. And then again, town center, the different setbacks. Basically, a lot of those are built to the property line. So we would allow them to build back to the property line. Again, the 5 foot is to keep 5 foot on each side. So there's that 10 foot to prevent a fireball needing to happen. If they go smaller, they would have to provide that firewall. CB is basically along 35. We have kind of the upper section and the lower section. I actually even put in here where it divides Griffith. So north of Griffith, we have smaller commercial lots. South of Griffith, we have larger lots. So it gives a little bit of a different setback and different lot coverage and those type of things depending upon what side of that road you are on. So on the north side is your liquor store, your gas station, and then the south side is your gas station, funeral home, those type of things that are really off the road a little bit more. I know there's been some discussion about kind of covenants that may be on some of those properties, but we don't regulate covenants. So we would regulate the standards that are put in place, and then if there are covenants on any of those properties, that would be between all those landowners. So if there would ever be a problem that they're meeting our standard but not that standard, that would be more of a civil suit between those property owners. And then those are all your districts that we established. Again, we'll go more in detail over those specific lines at another meeting. But in general terms, I wanted you to understand kind of where they were and why we had the setbacks and the uses we had based off of those areas and what they're existing today. But when you look at this, you also have to think of what would be something we would want in those districts in the future too. So if we say, we want a barber shop or we have a barber shop in a residential district, but maybe that's not really, we don't want everybody in that residential district to have a barber shop. So that one's grandfathered in, but we don't want everybody to be able to have that because that would cause a lot of parking issues or traffic or those type of things. We want those to be in our town center so we can fill our storefronts with a business or something like that. So just as examples. Other districts, again, those are county districts, so I'm not going to go over them. The open space district, if we go, I think it's the last one. I did this a little bit different. We will see in the matrix when I go over it. It's mostly your government and park areas. So we would allow like water treatment plant, we would allow government offices, fire, police stations, parks, recreational type of things. Again, in the matrix, I didn't get to it on here. And then this is actually done. I obviously forgot to change it out of red. But then the setbacks for that area, we would have pretty well open. We can change that. Kind of talked back and forth on, and I can say this one. On the lot coverage, obviously parks you want less, but government you may want more. So maybe there's a difference between the uses where you do like 30% coverage for like a water plant, but you do the 10% for the park because you want it to be open ground. So anyway, you guys, I just want to give you this so that you can start thinking about it and being like, oh, for example, yeah, most of the places, because planning is very generalized, right? We can't go to each lot and say, well, this lot's going to get this, and this lot's going to get this, and this lot's going to get this. We have to generalize and say, average lot in this area is going to be this setback, this lot coverage, this stuff. Then they always have the option to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and say, in this scenario, it doesn't work. So that's kind of how planning is put in place. Then we have overlay districts, and those overlay districts, hopefully it's just like the next page and stuff. Overlay districts, for you guys, it wouldn't really be the airport overlay for Logansport, Cass County, and you wouldn't have the Cass County Gateway overlay district because that's like climbers. But you would have the Grissom overlay district. What that does is basically for Grissom, all we do is we send out our permits to them and they tell us if there's concerns with permits. So they don't deny per se. They give us information like this will change our flight pattern to this, which will cause this, which will cause that. If there's a lot of things that are really causing problems, let's say we're putting up a windmill right here, that would possibly cause them problems with their flight pattern, right? So we would be able to say, Grissom contacted us back and they have concerns with this height here because it will do this, or the electronics of that, or the radio frequency of that, or whatever. We would be able to deny that permit based off their concerns. It doesn't mean we have to. So just as a side note for you guys. And you guys would be in the farthest area. So if you go to, it's the last one on your page. you guys would be in the outer conical area. Uses, basically every underlining use is allowed. They will just let us know if anything that you guys are putting in those areas, dust glare, bird hazards, radio frequency, electronic stuff would cause problems. And then the max height is 500 feet. So I don't see a lot of things like a deck being put on or a house or even a downtown building is ever going to cause them any concern by having this district put in place. It just gives them the opportunity to let us know if there is a concern. Then there's site development regulations. It's 301. And these basically just talk about different things. So each one's kind of different. So the first one talks about accessory uses and structures. Accessory uses to your property, depending on if there's something like I have a professional office, that's going to be a home occupation because it's a business within there. But some accessory uses like a pool or a fence or those type of things would be allowed. So this kind of just spells out how that would work. The one that you may want to look at, because this is one that is currently just for the county, it's not for the county, you would be going over these standards, but it doesn't exempt Galveston, which you may want to exempt Galveston from, is we have a lot of people that have recreational vehicles that they stay in while they're building their home, or they had a fire and they want to live in there for a little bit. We're looking to change that to 30 days. It used to be 48 hours. You guys might want to stay with the 48 hours where it's only loading and unloading, so no one just goes on a lot to actually live there. So I would change that to be you guys just having the 48 hours. I'm assuming that's what you would prefer versus having them allowed the 30 days to live there. And then that was one of the biggest ones. The other one is tractor trailer combination of not be used for anything in any residential district. So someone parking a semi-trailer on their property because they need it for storage, that wouldn't be allowed. Now, if a commercial structure was like redoing their building, sometimes they keep supplies in those, that would be allowed. And there are some temporary uses that allow for it. But in general terms, you go get a shed, you don't get a semi-tractor and put it on your property. That's basically what that one's stating. Antennas, where they can be placed, basically by law, we ask them to place to the rear, but if they can't get signal, they can place it about anywhere. Outdoor display of merchandise, where they can display it, they can only display it in commercial and industrial districts. Dumpsters being screened, those are again for commercial and industrial uses. Collection stations, I don't know if you guys have a lot of these or not, where they like the clothes in or, okay. So we have some where they, especially in motorsport, they get overfilled and no one takes care of them and they become a problem. So there's something in there about that, and if they're a problem, that they have to be removed. Newspaper stands, drinking fountain, ice vending machines, drinking machines, those type of things could be in your commercial industrial district. And so those are just kind of some of those things that it's talked about. 302, additional yard regulations. This talks about things such as adding the awning. So you're allowed to have an awning or steps that may not meet that setback. So I have a really small lot and it's sloped. And so to get my steps correctly, I'm going to actually be into that setback. You're allowed a certain into that setback that we're requiring so that you can still get to the sidewalk or you can still do things. Also note that because of ADA, we cannot regulate anything that's used for wheelchair ramps as long as it's just for wheelchair ramps. So we've had people before that put in a wheelchair ramp with a porch that's like 6 by 10. That 6 by 10 is still a porch. The ramp getting onto the 6x10, we won't regulate what the 6x10 porch is. If they were just doing a 3x3, that would be a different situation. So that's what that talks about there, and how eaves can go into it, awnings can go into it, it's bay windows, you know, some roof lines can all go into that. We talk about air conditioning units as well. That's basically when you live beside each other and it creates a problem. Usually we don't have a problem with this, but discharge of the air onto the other person's property that then doesn't allow for the air for theirs. So there's kind of a distance depending upon the wattage of that. There's so many different things, but I'm just trying to hit a few of them. We do also have this language in here where if you're on a block and we have a standard of, let's say, 40-foot setback, but everybody on that block is 20, we can take the average of the block so that you can meet that 20 versus having to meet the 40. So that's something that's in here as well. Corner lots will always be used as both front yards, just as a side note. So because that corner lot could cause visual hindrance on both roads, right? So we looked at those as front yards for either one. If you go to buffer yards, 303, buffer yards are typically standards that you're going to see in industrial and commercial. What we're trying to do in most situations, there is a table that describes how you have to provide buffer, but in most cases what you're trying to do is buffer the industrial or commercial to the residential, right? So there's a higher buffer yard there. Residential to residential, you're not going to have anything. Commercial to residential, that there's not an actual residence there and just empty lot, they would still have to provide that buffer because we want a house to go there. So that's just what kind of this section talks about. We talked about heights of fences and the type of height. So that's one thing that I wanted to ask you guys. On guidelines, after you look at on the table page, F, guidelines, which actually goes to the next page. These are just guidelines of what we want to see planted. The reason we have that is that people are like, yeah, I'll go put some landscaping in, and they go get a twig, it's this big, that's a tree that's only 6 months old, and stick it in the ground. That does nothing, and it's going to take 10, 15 years before it makes a difference for that buffer yard. Right now in the county, what they have always wanted is just a guideline that we would like you to do larger. So I guess for you guys, would you like that to be a standard that they have to do that versus just it'd be nice if you planted it a little bit bigger than that. So that's something you may want to think about. And then this page here just shows how we do that. Let me explain it a little bit, and it's also hard to read. At some point, I'm going to have to redraw this. But basically, when you look at this chart here, this first one, what you're going to do is, in this matrix, it's like math. In this matrix, you find the use, and the uses say that your buffer yard is an A, let's say. So what you do is, my buffer yard's an A, and the property next to me is an A, so I don't have to put any buffering in. If I'm an E and I'm next to an A, which is like industrial next to a residence, I'm going to have to put the highest requirement of buffering, okay? So that kind of just explains it a little bit. So on this sheet, my highest would be either a 30-foot wide strip with 1 deciduous tree, 1 deciduous shrub, and 2 evergreens every 100 feet. Or if I want a skinnier one, I can do 15-foot width with 4 evergreens, 2 deciduous shrubs, and a fence. So we kind of gives them some different guidelines of, you know, if you do a wider one, you won't require you to put as much buffering because there's a bigger space between your business and that residence or whatever. So just trying to help you guys understand the different charts, so when you go over it, you kind of know what's going on. Then we have driveways. Typically our driveways have minimum and maximum widths. Oh, there it is. It's on this page. Oh, my pages are, okay, driveways. Minimum, maximum widths, which are here. So at each property line, so there's some distance between drives, there's distance between drives to drive, like neighbors to neighbors. I think we talked about this for Cindy's, like they share a drive, but they don't share a drive. We share a drive, but don't share a drive, but there's a little strip in the center. Typically, we don't want to see that because then who's doing what, and when I plow snow, where's it going, and where's the line actually at? And so what we usually have is some separation there. There are some that will always be that way and that are okay to be that way through a pipe stem. So it's basically one drive that accesses two houses. Yours is a little bit of a different situation, but
We separated.
Yeah.
Concrete, he has blocktop.
yeah, so that helps, right? Yeah. But
Everybody gets along.
yeah, right. So in the bigger schemes of things, when I hate my neighbor and that you put your asphalt over a little bit into my concrete, and now we're fighting of whose is what, by having that separation, you're not going to have that. So you're thinking of future, not existing houses, but future houses, you don't want that scenario to be there. So there's some separation. And then we also have some where they have a wide enough lot that they could put two drives, but that's the max that we're going to allow. Then fences, be surprised about fences and the drama with fences, but fences in the front yard we allow currently up to 48 inches because it used to be 3 feet, but Home Depot sells 4 foot and 5 foot and 6 foot, and so everybody just goes and gets it and then does it, and then I come in and say, oh, you gotta cut some of it, and then they take their chainsaw, go like this, not a straight line, and so we don't really want that. But the purpose is because it gives you a different feel if you're gonna put a 6 foot fence all the way around your house, right? It feels closed off, it feels like something happening that maybe shouldn't be happening behind there. So in the front of the house, we're looking to provide some visual, so 4 foot, and then the side and rear of your house, you would be allowed to have 6 foot. In residential, we don't want barbed wire, electrical, glass, those things. And we usually have a must be out of fence material. So what happens in Logansport, no other community, is like I have a car door that I'm making into a fence, or I have sheet metal left over and a car door and a wood fence. And so if you have, like we have metal fences that are actually fences, you can have that. But when you're actually trying to take car parts and make it into a fence, we're trying to make sure that that's not happening. And then height regulations, there are some, you're probably only going to be at the 35. Do you know downtown, are any of your buildings higher than 35? 35 is usually 3 stories.
Is the one that Slaughter owns, is that 3 stories?
That'd be something you want to check into because we have exemptions. So we could do an exemption for downtown where, like in Logansport downtown, they're allowed to go 60 feet instead of 35 feet because they have some really tall buildings. So, and then the other ones are agricultural bins and those type of things. Most of those are not going to be windmill, those type of, are not going to be in the town. But that if we need to have an exemption for downtown or something, let me know on that. The other,
Let me interrupt for a minute before you leave. Do you have any questions for her?
I'm sure at a later date I will.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions.
I'm sure, but,
And I wanted to present this to you guys here as one group, but you can always call me and set up a time if you want to go through certain sections with just me and talk about it, that's fine.
I'll read through it some more.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll get the gist of it all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, and I'm still working on it, so as you find things like I already did. So accessory structures, what we try to do with accessory structures is make them not taller than the primary residence. So that's why we have in here, if you have a 1-story, you can go 16 feet. Sometimes they are a little bit taller, but they're not 20 feet to your, 15-foot house. They're 16 feet to your 15-foot house. And we go to the peak of the structure. So if you have a 2-story home, you can have the 24 feet in height. The reason for that is tons of people want RV like canopies or buildings, and those are always so tall, and so that's when we changed that regulation. Swimming pools, we regulate those as accessory structures, so they're only 5 feet from the property line. Also, hot tub spas, saunas are, but we don't require a permit for them. So you can put them anywhere unless it causes a problem. When we find out you're on the property line and your neighbor is very upset, then we have that 5-foot separation from the property line. The one thing I added for Galveston in this section is temporary pools such as slope or PVC pools must meet the above ground pool standards, which is that setback and also some sort of mechanism, whether it's a pool or a lid or whatever, if it's up more than 6 months. So what we have found, I don't know if you guys have found, is that people go buy the Walmart pools that are supposed to be for the summer, and they get left up all year round, and then the liner caves in, and you have mosquitoes, and you have water that then pours onto your neighbors, because they're not made to be permanent. So if we're going to use them as permanent, we need to put some standards in to make them permanent, basically. And then off-street loading spaces, this is gonna be, I'm not gonna go through this very much with you guys. It's basically for your commercial and industrial. It tells you when you have to have loading spaces. Off-street parking. Any of our parking requirements that we have are always considered off-street parking. So let's say we put a business in that says we have to have one off-street parking spot. So like, I have a single family house, I'm changing it into a duplex, and we say that duplex, because now you're gonna add more vehicles, you at least have to provide 1.5, that's right, two off-street parking spaces per that unit that you're putting in. That way you're not clustering the drive or the road that's already has parking on it, right? So in neighborhoods where, okay, we're all basically single family. Now if you think, what if we were all duplexes? That doubles the amount of vehicles, right? So we need to figure out a way to not have them all on the street. So that's why when a new unit comes in, we would require them to provide some off-street parking and not calculate the on-street. So a lot of times people would be like, well, I have a wide frontage, and so I have 4 parking spaces there. Those aren't your parking spaces. I don't know if you go through this, but those aren't your parking spaces. I know that you want to park right in front of your house, but they're really public parking. So when we have that, and now you're parking in front of your neighbors, and there's 4 people living in that house, 2 adults, 2 kids that drive, at least we can pull 2 of those cars off of the street. And so hopefully helping the situation. So again, kind of the math that we have to do here is, again, you go look at the uses, and there's a table here that says the parking standard that they each meet. From that parking standard, you look at this table, and it says what each of those uses would have to provide for off-street parking. Obviously, a gas station is going to provide some off-street parking compared to a residence. Barber shop is going to provide different parking than an industrial site. So they all have their own specific ones. And then we have another sheet that shows in those parking lots, how do they have to be laid out? I don't know if you go to some people called me and say like, well, I don't like Walmart's parking lot and how it's set up. I don't either, but it meets the standards, so they're allowed to do it. Basically, there's enough room to back up. I just don't like that they have angled parking on 2 ways. But if they can do that, that's not something they can't do. We just need to make sure that they have wide enough, long enough, and enough area to back out. So that's what this basically is saying there. There's also some language in here about handicap and what they have to provide, as well as the type of parking lot. So over a certain percentage, currently we have in here where they only have to provide dustless surface. But if you guys would like to, we could put in a stipulation that Galveston because dustless means that you can have gravel. So do you want your, not that they would do this, but do you want your gas station to just have a gravel lot? If they came in and said, I just want a gravel lot, I would say, yep, you're approved, just have a gravel lot. Gotta remember, this is our 12 miles and our county. So right now we just have, it's fine. Maybe you just want it for commercial. If you had an industrial come in, for example, like Tyson's, a lot of theirs is just gravel, because could you imagine having to do that whole area in asphalt or concrete? So they have a certain section that's concrete, a certain section that's asphalt. So it may be something that you want to say that in our town for commercial, we want it to have at least a hard surface instead of just a dustless where it's asphalt or concrete. Something to think about. And then we do provide some landscaping in different areas and buffer requirements. So, for example, people have parking and then they park onto the sidewalk, basically. There's no buffer there. What you want to provide is some sort of a buffer so that that sidewalk can be used. A lot of the times if you don't have a buffer, that car ends up, the front of it ends up in the sidewalk, and now you can no longer use the sidewalk. So we have some of those buffer requirements from the sidewalk to the parking, as well as drive lanes, because it better defines those drive lanes. I know that like one of the places we have where they have a few areas that have landscaping, but not all, but it's asphalt to concrete, and so it looks like I can go off anywhere I want, and then they hit the big curve. And they're like, oh, I guess that wasn't a drive. So when you have those buffers with landscaping or something, they usually help the whole traffic flow. Signage. I don't know how you guys feel about signage, but it's my least favorite. So signage, there's been some new laws and case laws. So I had to totally change the county's signage because it didn't need it. We cannot read signs. So if there is something inappropriate on those signs, I cannot say you have to take that sign down. Unless they don't meet the number of signs, the size of the sign, location of the sign, the height of the sign, the illumination of the sign. We can regulate all of those things, but we cannot regulate what is on the sign. So it kind of talks about this, people parking their vehicle as a sign. So I know we have like tree services, and while they're there doing the tree service, that's fine. But when they go park a trailer or a vehicle on the corner lot because it's great visibility, it then turns into a sign because they're not doing any work at that facility. So those are kind of some of those. If you look at, there's also signs regarding political signs that we have to go by state regulation, which kind of is interesting based off the case law. We're not supposed to read signs, but during 60 days before and 6 days after, I can read the sign to determine if it's political so that they can have more than the one sign that we usually allow. So it's interesting that it's there. And then we have electronic message center signs. So the church has one. Is that the only one you guys have?
I think so. Oh yeah, Tom Hayes has one on the side of his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
His is mostly amber though. Amber and black background. Amber. You changed it.
It's got color.
It has color now?
Mhm.
Okay. I think when you first put it up. And anyway, there's some standards we have in place that we found have worked. We can always tweak these. We can, again, this whole ordinance, as we adopt it, if the next month we find out there's something we want to change, we can change it. So it's not like forever and always, this is the regulation that's in place. It's just a starting point to see what works and doesn't work. And if we continue to hear that this area, if it's a sign, we continue to hear like every time we have to make them go to BZA or every time there's a problem, we can make those changes. That's kind of the only way you find out you need to make those changes is when stuff comes up. Well, I didn't think about that situation, so yeah, we do need to make that change. The electronic message center signs, we found that anytime they use, like pictures you can have, but when the whole sign is white and the message is black, it's very bright. And so we have where it should be black backgrounds. Now you can still use pictures of colors and those type of things, but we found that black background doesn't cause as much illumination and distraction. So that's why we have that. Again, you guys want to have that different in your ordinance. We just say except for Galveston. And then we have like the amount of transition, the amount it's up, the nits it's giving off at night, the nits it's giving off during the day, and then also making sure that those lights have dimmers, automatic dimmers on them, so if it's a storm, it would, yeah. You guys need to know where I am.
No,
Okay.
I was looking at Sunny's, and I figured it out.
So there's some more of that information on there. There's also setbacks from those signs to residential, et cetera, et cetera. So the signs that you have currently, they, again, are grandfathered, so they're fine. But anybody else coming in, you got to think of it as, what if every single person put up that type of sign? Is that going to be a problem? It's not really the one sign that we have. It's not a problem. It's if we allow it, then everybody can do it. And so is that something we really want to happen? So I think we put it in that they could do it in essential business only is what I have right now. So you guys can decide if you want that different. So if you go to another table, lovely table, it also talks about how you calculate, in the other part, it also talks about how you have to maintain them, how you have to calculate the square footage, how you calculate the height. Once it's removed, and then basically abandoned signs, if they're abandoned, we can also go make them remove them. So with that said, we also have the different districts and the signage that you're allowed in the different districts. You guys don't have agricultural, so I'm going to jump over to RR, R1, SR, NR. And those are your residential districts. So typically you're going to have like a monument sign into a subdivision maybe, or a wall-mounted sign. These prerequisites are basically that they're on those sites. So I don't know that you guys have a church in a residential district, but if you had a church in a residential district, that property would be allowed a 25 square foot sign. Okay, so that's kind of how that plays out. In the previous part, it does talk about allowing for address signs and those type of things. So we don't regulate those. We also don't regulate yard ornaments. Gnomes or flags or whatever. A flag doesn't really become too concerning until it's like a billboard, not a flag anymore, or a banner and not a flag anymore, and it's verbiage. There's verbiage on it. If you're flying it on a pole, we don't regulate it. Then there is nope, none of these are CB, B1, B4. So this is your commercial district along the highway. And you can see we allow a lot of different signs. So you would be allowed one awning sign, one hanging sign. Those are like blade signs. They like hang off from your building like this. Wall signs, so that's actually on your building. Window signs, that would be the actual window of your building. Snap frame panel. So let's say that you got a drive-through restaurant and they, like a lot of them have it, like Burger King, Hardee's, they have like pictures of the meals that you can buy and like, or like buy the, whatever. It's like artwork, but it's advertisement. And so that's what those snap panel signs are. Pre-sale signs, those are the signs that you look at before you get to the menu boards. And then, I might have started on the wrong page, but anyway, on the back side of that is also part of it. Menu boards, monument signs, pole signs, wayfinding signs, or slash directional signs. So there's a lot of signs I know that people say we don't allow a lot of signs, but there's so many different types of signs that you could be allowed. And then so each one of those goes into how many of those signs, the square footage of those signs, the height of those signs, the material maybe, the setback maybe, the landscaping, the lighting. There's a lot of different things that each one of them goes into. So then there's, the next page is temporary signs. There was temporary signs in residential too, I forgot to go over it. Banner, portable, marker signs, and yard signs. Again, I can't read them, but we allow them as temporary. So 45 days a year, no more than 3 times a year for most of them. Marker signs are usually like your seed signs, like I'm using this seed for the farmers, and so they're allowed a little bit longer. So you have that same thing here for the CV, where you're allowed banner, portable, and yard. And then there on the back of that is your TC. This is more your downtown district, so you're not going to have like the mini boards, you're not going to have those snap frames, you're not going to have the pre-sales because these are taking up from a lot. Right? There's not really a drive-through opportunity too much. But you're allowed awnings, hanging, again, blade, wall signs, window signs, and wall directories. So sometimes you have multiple businesses in that building, and so you'd be able to put on the outside those multiple businesses. And then again, these are permanent monument and sidewalk signs. So sidewalk signs would still have to be approved by you if they want to put it in the sidewalk, because that's not their property, but we allow for sidewalk signs. And then the temporary is banner and yard signs in downtown. Okay. Should have started out. I'm gonna make your head hurt before you leave tonight, but I didn't. So halfway through, I'm gonna say it. So for Article 4, these are the different uses that are allowed in here that have additional specifications. So if you're doing an accessory apartment, these are things that you have to do. Adult business, these are things you have to do. A commercial garage, these are like additional things you have to do, such as putting up a fence, such as, you know, whatever, landscaping, et cetera, et cetera. You will see little red marks on there. Those are things that we're currently discussing about adding into our ordinance for the county. I don't think that they would be something that you would have to worry about, but just so you know why those are there. So you would only use this section if we allowed it in any of your districts. So none of these would apply to you if it's not allowed in your district, just as a FYI. So if you see some of these and you're like, well, I don't want that here, but it doesn't say not in Galveston, it's because we may not allow that use in Galveston. For instance, there's wind farms in here. Well, we don't allow a wind farm in Galveston, so that regulation wouldn't apply to you. Makes sense. So confined feed, home occupations, again, we've talked about that. If you live in a home and you want to have a business, there's certain ways you can go about doing it, certain signage you can have, et cetera, et cetera. We go from that to major home occupations, cottage industries, those are for more your agricultural districts, larger junkyard, scrapyard, manufactured homes, just so that you know. Manufactured is the proper language to use, not mobile, but that's what they are, just so that you guys know. There are a few little red marks that I want to check with Ralph if that's still the required amount, so that's there on those. Mineral resources, I need to double check. So you'll see yellow too. A lot of those is I'm double checking the Indiana code to make sure it's still the right Indiana code, or that it's, I moved a lot of things around county ordinance and changed a lot of things. And so I need to make sure they're referencing the right section. So if you see those highlights, those are just notes for myself.
You might tell them who Ralph is, just.
Oh,
because
Ralph, he is
they
our
know.
building commissioner. So he would be the one that would come down here and inspect any permits. So if they're adding onto their house, he would be inspecting the footers, rough ends, finals, or any commercial construction. He would also be inspecting that. I did add here 417 sidewalk standards. I might move it to a different section because it's kind of weird in this section, but, I wanted to do that sidewalks had to be provided by any development. The reason being, Dollar General went into Walton, and Walton didn't really care that they put in sidewalk because there's no matching sidewalk. And I said, you want to have that there so that you, as Walton, wouldn't have to go put that in later. Well, what happened was the state came in and they did the sidewalk and they connected up to it. So Walton didn't have to do any of the cost of getting all that sidewalk all the way to the Dollar General from the neighborhoods. So you always want to plan ahead, and it may look weird for a while, like we don't have sidewalk that connects to that, but you're planning for that, and especially if it's along the commercial area and it's NDOT. I mean, obviously if you have that sidewalk there, they're going to connect to it when they're doing those things. So if someone wouldn't want to do that, they can always go to the BZA and we can waive that standard. I just think it's something to think about because that's the situation that happened in Walton, and they were glad to not mention to do it. No, do it, because they went to BZA to be able to put it in that location, and we were like, I was like, just make it, it's just a connection, just ask that to be one thing that they do for you, and then I was so excited that the state, it literally happened like 2 years later, the state came in, and I was like, that happened really fast. I was thinking like 20 years from now, but it actually happened pretty fast.
I got a question about something.
Uh-huh.
Between our post office and our town hall,
Uh-huh.
I've always wondered why we don't have a sidewalk. How do we go about getting one there?
So it's,
Because
it's right of way though, right? Or is it?
It would be highway, right away.
So typically there's a.
because I see people walking there all the time, and it's right on traffic, and it looks awfully dangerous.
Yeah, so the state definitely let you do it. You can contact the state and say when they repave it, they can fix that area. Those are kind of your two options. You pay for it, wait for the state for whenever they get to it. But if you do it yourself, you just submit a permit to the state to say that you're gonna do it, and they usually sign off on it.
Is there anything that says like 2 governmental buildings has to have a sidewalk that connects?
In your ordinance, I don't know. But it wouldn't matter because if those were pre-existing and you didn't say they had to have it, they wouldn't have had to put it in at that time. And you can't, claim's not retroactive. Like we talked about, everything's grandfathered in. So because you didn't have a regulation that they had to, and so they didn't, when you put the regulation in, they don't have to. Because it was already done. But this would be the scenario like if, let's say that area didn't have it and they were building a building in that area. I know this makes zero sense, but let's say that they would have to put that sidewalk in. So it would provide you the opportunity to make it happen next time. What stinks is probably not really. So in that scenario, the only 2 options is notifying the state so that when they come back in, that they fix that section. Because they do have to do 88 corners and stuff. I just don't know where you're at on your like timing for maybe that project.
I've been that long since they did.
Yeah, so they may not, and that federal mandate changed not that long ago. So the other option is that you could go in and put it in. There's just a state permit that you submit. Just really easy paperwork you submit and say, we're gonna do this. So, and I can help you with that if that's something you guys wanna do. Yeah. So solar energy, you guys won't have, the only thing that we have for you guys is accessory solar. It's allowed, remember how many districts, we'll look through it here in a minute. But they can be on the roof, they can be on your wall mounted, or they can be ground mounted, and these are just like solar panels that residential or commercial get. These aren't like the farm solar panels. Then there's temporary uses.
So on that, if somebody is adding solar panels, is that permit?
Yeah, so it would be permitted still. We review the load on the roof. So people think that you can just go put solar panels on, but sometimes your roof load. Because you gotta think there's a roof load and there's a snow load on that roof. And if you add solar panels, sometimes that's gonna be too much weight on that roof and then it's gonna be a problem. So we actually, before they do that, have to prove that the weight of that is not gonna hinder the engineering of the roof. You also have the other where if they want to connect up to the grid, we have to get a sign off from the utility company. So those are kind of the two things that we look for. And then if it's ground mounted, we look for setbacks. So temporary use, there's tons of them. I did add in your guys's, which wasn't previously in the county ordinance, but I feel like it's kind of moving this direction, is mobile vendors. That's not just food vendors, that's any mobile vendor. So I've heard of barber shops being in like trailers and doing kids' hair, or selling the dog grooming, selling drugs. I mean, people come up with crazy ideas and go get a trailer and start selling stuff. And so I put some regulations in, like if it's food where, you know, fire safety, the kitchen has to be inspected, you know, those sort of things, hours of operations, during what time. You can change those. Those are just based off what Logan Sport allowed. So you guys may want to look through this and be like, we do not want anything at 12 a.m. on a Friday. We want to scale that back a lot.
How would food trucks fall into that?
That is a food truck.
Okay. Taco food truck?
Yep. I was just saying it's not just, because a lot of times when we say mobile vendors, we only think of food, but it's anybody that's basically have a business that moves around. And then I put in here that somewhere, the one question I had is, do you guys have a noise ordinance?
I think we did.
We had that discussion when we,
Because it's difficult to enforce, isn't it?
It's very difficult.
that's what we were told.
Yeah, it is very difficult. But I had where you could have them basically in the town. I don't know where it is, but I'll have to find it. Basically, on this location, and that I wouldn't review it, they wouldn't need a permit, they would just need to get approval from the parks or county council. You weren't sure who was the right person, but like if they like, you know, put it in here in the parking lot. I'll try to see where I put that. But I also did that for like the farmer's market, if you wanted to have it out here. There's no permit for me, it's just town council approval. You know, those type of things.
We did create a farmer's market ordinance, we just never had anybody implement anything.
Okay. Was it just for this area?
Mhm.
So anything that we adopt, just so that you know, and you have an ordinance, I'm not gonna know about it probably, but if you have an ordinance that supersedes our, meaning it's more restrictive than ours, your ordinance will prevail. So if you go through this and go, well, you know what, farmer's market, I'd like to know who's in here, but you know, something that doesn't relate to this, that I have in here, but it's not maybe specific enough, or like I have like in subdivisions, we have how roads are constructed, but if you guys have how your roads are supposed to be constructed, that would supersede. I try to say the jurisdiction will provide, you know, those type of things. So if there's anything that's contradictory, and it does state that in this ordinance, that the more restrictive will be the one that you have to meet, I just would like to know about them. So if you guys look through it here and say, oh yeah, we have this, or we have this, that way I'm not allowing something and permitting it, and they're spending the money and starting on it, and then we find out actually they weren't allowed to do that because you have another ordinance that regulates it differently. So just something FYI. But yeah, so a bunch of different ones. Again, you'll have to look at your districts versus the county, because some of these aren't on here, but selling from your property some eggs that you had from your chickens. I don't know how much you guys want to do that or allow that, we do not do animal ordinances. I know you guys talked about having an animal ordinance. All we have is pasture and grazing, whether it's allowed. We have something that says basically if the pet is for, if the pasture or grazing is kept for a pet or a hobby, you're allowed to do it. So you're, in that instance, your animal ordinance would supersede. If you say, no, you can't have a goat, you can't have chickens, I don't know if that's the case, but we would usually tell them, you want to check with Galveston and see if they have an animal ordinance. Now, if we have it on file, we would be like, here's what Galveston's ordinance is on animals.
We have not created that yet.
Okay.
Because that discussion, I think there is one, but it's kind of really outdated.
Uh-huh.
So we talked about,
I know we talked about like
we were going to do one because we had that one property that we were pulling into a residential, we thought.
Right.
But we have not done that with this really kind of being.
Yeah, so one of the things I talked about in your zoning, you don't really want, like, you're a small town, you don't want to have 15 different zoning districts. Then what happens is, why is my neighbor able to do this, but I'm not? You know, that becomes a problem because this is on this and this right beside it is on something different. So what I recommended is just having a couple residential, a commercial, a downtown. I know that you have the old sawmill that's kind of industrial, but would you rather, because it's by residential, talk to the people through the BZA process before you just allow any industrial to go there? Like if you have it zoned industrial, that means any industrial that you allow in an industrial district is gonna go there. And industrial is light industrial. It doesn't specify, we would only allow someone that's making cabinets in there. You know what I'm saying? So by doing it this way where we have it commercial, anything that's wanting to be industrial would have to come through a process. Or rezoned or whatever, but we would be able to review it versus just allowing it and then all the neighbors going, I have dust coming in my pool from whatever they're doing, or et cetera. So in that same essence, I said, I don't know that you really have an agricultural district. Yes, you have some homes that have larger acreage that may have animals, but maybe it makes more sense to have it as residential. And then you allow that anything over 2 acres is allowed to have these animals or whatever.
And that's where that discussion came in that we had, because there is on the edge of town, in the current zoning, there is one property that is agricultural.
It's
And
just
so, yeah, one property. It's for sale right now.
that's good for a while.
Yeah.
So obviously what they have today would be grandfathered in. Or they'll tell me it's a hobby and they'll be allowed to do it, so, or a pet. Yeah. Then there's wind, again, not something you're gonna have to worry about. Wind has a lot of pages though, so. A lot of pages. So then we get to Article 5, environmental regulations. This is just kind of my catch-all area. Talk about drainage and erosion, and you know, we have people that like, I literally am creating a funnel onto my neighbor's property. You're not allowed to do that. Now, if there's rain that happens and it goes on your next door neighbor's property, that's a different story, but you can't actually create like a creek that's gonna go pond on your neighbor's property, you know, those kind of things. Also, you have to be careful with erosion control during construction projects and those other things too. How we handled anything with hazardous waste and nuclear waste, how we handle land application of sludge and wastewater, and then our normal performance standards of when you're doing these things, you know, you need fire protection, be conscious of your noise, vibrations, odors, air pollution, those type of things. And then the last one talks about trying to keep the environmental regulations so that you kind of keep your natural amenities a little bit. Then, Article 6, you have planning and development. I'll just explain what that is. This is the procedure to do it. But basically, we have all those zoning districts we talked about, but in some situations, maybe none of those districts make sense. You can create your own district, or that developer can create your own district for what they want to do. And it's run through the process just like a rezone, and then they have to establish their own standards. So all those standards we've talked about, they have to create their own standards of what they're gonna do within that district. So that's basically what that is. I'm not sure that you'll have one, but. Then we have the subdivision regulations. I'm not gonna go through a lot of that. The one thing that I did want to talk to you guys about is, I want you guys to look at the table here. Here. And this is kind of how we state roads have to be constructed. So you guys have your own, like how sidewalks have to be constructed, how roads have to be constructed, alleys, whatever. You have like any standards of like the thickness or the type of subgrade or anything.
That's a John question.
He may just go out there and say, this is what we typically do, so this is what we're gonna do.
I think that's closer to what, yeah.
That's typical. So I just wanna make sure that somewhat of what we have here is your typical. Now, you're not gonna have, like your arterials are the state, so you're not gonna have these. You're basically gonna have maybe a subdivision or local street. Like, and this is average daily traffic. So I know your local street right now is getting a lot more than this probably because it's being blocked. But in typical terms, how much traffic do you get on them to design it for those type of things? Like, do you create a no semi-traffic so that those roads that aren't up to par don't get used for that? Those type of things. So those are things to think about.
So that particular ordinance is now in place. In
So
fact,
the semi.
we just, yes, we added it this year to not have any truck traffic or 3-axle vehicle traffic on the town roads.
Okay.
In fact, I made myself a note to ask John if the signs have been ordered now that we've determined that. Do you need those kinds of ordinances also?
I don't, because I'm not the one that would be regulating that. What I want to know about that is in our thoroughfare plan, which we haven't gone through yet, which will be a whole other thing, would identify the classifications of roads and what should be on those roads. So, for instance, we have park here, right? And we have some open ground down here. Do we want, the next time we go to pave this, to update park to be more a wider road because we feel like we're gonna do a huge subdivision down here? So your thoroughfare plan would say, next time you go to get money to pave this road, we're trying to widen it to this so that we can get half heavy traffic, more heavy traffic on this road, or whatever. Just as an example. So I don't need specifically that, but in general terms, that we know we don't have to build it up to semi-standards is good to know. Because we're not allowing those things there. Subdivision, I will explain this. A lot of people think subdivision, they think sidewalks, lighting, 20 houses, all those things. Subdivision in the planning world is any split for any property. So I don't have it here because you guys think I literally spent so much time on this, and it may not seem like it, but I still have some sections that I have to do, and one of them is the exemptions, minor and major subdivisions, but it's identifying what you want to happen as divisions. So let's say, like I was talking earlier, there's 2 houses that have been built on this lot since 1970. But the person that bought it wants to split off the other house and sell that because they don't want that house anymore. They just want the one house. So that is a split, that is a subdivision, that is something that I would have to review. I would have to review how much lot coverage do they have, what is the setback with the new line, those type of things. So, and it goes all the way to the 100 lot subdivision. So, or small, I just want this sliver because of my septic's failing, so I need a little bit. So when you think of subdivisions, it's all of those. In here, it specifies differently what you have to do depending upon. If you're doing a major subdivision, you have to have some lighting, you have to have a performance bond to make sure that road gets built, you know, those type of things. But most of yours are gonna be smaller, which will probably be exempt in that those houses were established a long time ago. They're only getting a little sliver. That house burnt down and they had 3 acres, so we're gonna split it into 2 lots, whatever. So that's what I have for you now. What I have in finishing is, I don't have a lighting ordinance currently in the county, so that's one area that I'm researching into. I'm finishing up the subdivision, so we'll talk about exempt and like what that means. So exempt ones would be some of the ones that I talked about that would be more your community, where we don't have to go through the public hearing subdivision process. You just give me the right as staff to say, does it meet these things? Go ahead and sign off, basically. So we'll be going to that. And then the final pages are procedural. So those are more state law things of like, what's the Plan Commission actually do? What's the BZA actually do? And then enforcement of the ordinance. When someone's not meeting the ordinance, what are the enforcement remedies? I will tell you guys that we are very like, you didn't know, okay, work with us type of people, until you're one that's a repeat offender. So that's kind of how we operate. We just don't go in and say, oh, you owe us a bunch of money, oh, we're gonna go tear down your building. That's not how we operate, just as a side note for you. I will go over this really quick. I wanted to keep it to like an hour, so I think I'm doing all right. People get overloaded, and I'll do that anyway with what all I'm talking about, but lose you after an hour, ready for a nap. So on this, I just want to explain this a little bit so that you can look at it. Again, remember that yours are NR, SR, TC, CB, and open space. And then you just follow this across. So if it has a P, it's permitted as a right. So as long as they meet all the other standards of the ordinance, they can happen. You will not be notified. Your neighbors will not be notified. No one will be notified. They can just come in and get a permit. So that's usually, people are like, why didn't I know? Well, we said that it's allowed there and they met all the standards. They just get to do it, okay? And S is a special exception. What that means is that maybe we don't mind it being that district, but we want to let the neighbors know, and we want to put some standards on it maybe. So it goes before the Board of Zoning Appeals so that we can review it some before we just go say, yeah, go ahead and do it. All right, and then an X is not allowed at all. Now, you're going from an advisory to an area plan commission. The biggest difference here, make up your board, your ordinance, those type of things. But the biggest difference is you can't do use variances anymore. So anything with an X in your districts, they would not be able to do. The only way they'd be able to do it is 1, rezoning their property to something else, or 2, we make a change to the ordinance and change it from an X to an S. Okay? Both those options are possible and easy to do. So don't think like we need to make everything an S. We can still go about it in a different route. But I think what we are saying here is that residential doesn't belong in industrial. Industrial doesn't belong in residential, and that's what you're kind of looking at in this scenario. Okay, and then again, I kind of explained it on the side. The buffer class helps us determine what buffer yard separation and landscaping they have to put in, and the parking is how much parking they have to provide. Those 2 columns were already there for the county. So what I did is I just added in your districts, and based off some conversations we had, knowing your community, I made some general understanding, guesses, what have you, to make those lines and what's permitted, what's a special exception, and what's not allowed. I did make a few changes in here. We added, again, if you see the grayed out areas, it's because they reference a section, so I have to go check that. But we did make some changes in here. For one, we added commercial apartments. That was not there in the ordinance before. What that is on the second floor of like the downtown buildings, you can have apartments in it. We did talk about that some of your downtown buildings have been converted to all apartments. Again, that would be grandfathered in. But what you really want to try to do is have some storefront as commercial to provide that visual for pedestrians, so that they go to this business and then they go to the next business and they go to the next business, and that's how you're going to kind of bring up your downtown of visitors and people going downtown. So if you only have one business downtown, it's hard for that business to pull in pedestrians or people because there's only one business. But if you have multiple businesses, you're more likely to pull in people to spend an hour or two going to those different businesses. Or I'll stop in that other business because I stopped in here. The other thing that I changed, and I printed off the wrong one, is in retail trade, it should say 2,500. Typical downtown businesses, and this is the reasoning is because I wanted to maybe allow it. So if you look at that one, I'll tell you this. I obviously printed the wrong one out, but the TC I had as no more than 2,500 is permitted, and then I did the P for central business. But the more than 2,500, I made that a special exception in the TC. Don't show it in here, but that's what I did. I made that change because typically your downtown buildings aren't going to be more than 2,500 square foot. And so we want those larger businesses to be on your major corridors than in downtown. We want more of your services and small retails and your local flavor to be in your downtown. And then shopping centers, which makes zero sense of why this was ever 200,000, is 10,000 and 10,000. Your shopping center that you have is, I'm trying to think what's in it. There's a restaurant. It's the one that backs up onto the highway.
There's now a restaurant, a tanning shop, or a tanning bed business.
So that one that's a shopping center. There's multiple units in there. They would be, I think they were like 8,000. So when I say 10,000 square feet, I was going to allow that in the CB, but anything over 10,000, an S, just so that we review, like, I mean, that's a good size for your community. Like, if someone's wanting to do more than that, there may be a question there. Now, if your community grows and you become closer to Kokomo and Kokomo's coming to you, we might change that. But at this stage, we're thinking more of that size as being more appropriate for your scale, right? So that was the only couple changes there, just so that you guys have the right information. And then other than that, you just go through and you, like I said, you follow it across, follow it down to see which one would be in what district. And you guys can always, we can always just meet and just go through line by line of this if you want to. Again, I did it based off of conversations and just kind of knowing your community to determine what made sense in my areas. I will email you the actual map to show where those different districts are, what's the SR, what's the NR, so that you can follow along, like, yeah, that makes sense in that area, or no, that doesn't make sense in that area. We're at the stage of totally tweaking things, but I wanted to present some stuff to you so that you knew I was working on it, one. Two, that you guys have an opportunity to start going through it. This is obviously not the public hearing. We would first adopt the plan commission, the joint plan commission, the area plan commission. We would adopt that before we would adopt this. But I wanted to start this conversation before we get there, so it's not a year later that we adopt this. I'm hoping that it's like within a month or two of establishing that. So I told Jeff that we would start working on the actual plan commission in January. I don't know what I was gonna say, in January, so that in February, my months are all screwed up. In February, we could come to both boards and get that adopted, so that we can then finalize some of these things. So in that time frame, we'll keep on doing some more reviews of this. So I plan on in January, probably the end of January, to come back with some revisions, some questions that you guys have, or revisions that email, call me, set up a meeting. I don't care, however you guys want to go about it. I'll also start meeting with the county, because I did make some changes to the county. So it wasn't just like Galveston changes. I started to just do Galveston, and then I got like, oh, well, I want to make these changes. And then I was like, well, this layout's bad, and so I want to do these. And then I was like, no, I just am getting crazy here. So that's why I was like, I'm going to set a deadline so that I at least have to stop making changes. So that's what I did for the night. But I thought this is enough to go over anyway. And really, procedurals and enforcement can be an education on how planning, after you have this, how planning works. So that can take an hour just talking about the ins and outs of that. So
When do you perceive this being the official document?
yeah, so if we adopt the plan commission in February, the plan commission can have their first meeting and start their, if everybody's ready to go with it, could actually do their public hearing and their bylaws and their like establishment of everything, which would then end of March. You guys meet this night usually, right?
This is a special meeting.
Oh, this is
We meet the second Monday.
Okay, the second. Yeah, because you're like, yeah, I'm reading it. I was like, that's a weird date that you guys meet. Because I'm used to Mondays, but so we currently do Tuesdays at 8:30. If we kept that, well, I don't know if we will. But if we kept that time, then we could have the public hearing, and then you guys could review it in March. If not, it would be April. So by April, we could have everything done. And that's just if like I said, there's a lot of people that get on board, right? We have to like figure out who's gonna be on that board. That's why if Jeff and I can lay out who's gonna be on that board, and you guys are like, not who's gonna be on it, but like, it'll say like a representative from yada yada, those type of things. So you guys would have to adopt it, and then in February, adopt it and have people ready to be put in those positions. So it just depends on like how fast that you guys want to get it done. And I know that it's taken you forever, but it's
A lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff,
stuff.
and it's also trying to understand your community to be able to make sure I'm not force feeding you something that doesn't make sense, and that's not what I want to do. It may feel that way initially, starting out, because we're still learning what works and what doesn't work. But we can always make those changes along the way to make sure that, Walton nowadays, I don't think they have a BZA case like once a year, maybe. And if that's happening, that means whatever's happening in that town, we have it pretty well in our ordinance to meet what they're doing, So that's the intent, that's what we're trying to go for. I don't like meetings any more than the next person. If you talk to anybody, they think I do, but it's a lot. I know I overwhelmed you, probably. Maybe I didn't, and that'd be amazing. But any initial questions? I'm sure you'll want to read this every night before you go to bed and find the mistakes. Oh, she didn't put the E on the end of this or whatever. But any initial questions for me while I'm here?
So what's the major benefit going with the county?
The major benefit is keeping you legal. I've been to multiple Galveston planning commissions, and they've not previously done the things that need to be done in the proper orders. Now,
How's that?
I haven't been there recently, so they may totally have it together now, and that's fine. But you also get the building inspector that's gonna be inspecting properties. We also have all online, permitting, so they can pay online, they can submit online, they can do all of that. And so they can get their permit within a couple of days versus a month. I don't know, just.
Okay, the opposite.
I'm gonna go back and answer when we actually first made this approach, because this was one of the things that Brad actually encouraged us to do, was we had just done the comp plan. And several things within the comp plan talked about inspections and different things. And we realized the liabilities that we had if somebody doing a building project there had just been a gas explosion. And so I remember my asking that as the specific question, what happens? You've got a liability because you don't have anybody doing any of those inspections. You know, somebody comes in here now and they want to build their own house. Nobody is checking anything that they're doing.
So the opposite, what's the downfall? What's it?
Downfall that most see is because you don't know everything that's happening. You see it, but you don't know, because I'm reviewing it.
I mean, what's the downfall of going with the county?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I review it, so you don't know everything because it's not coming in front of you, it's not coming from in front of BZA, your BZA or your planning commission for rumor mill to happen and you all know what's going on. So you see something go up, it may get approved and have a permit, hopefully they post it, so you know. But the downfall is you're not as,
Communication.
I don't know this communication, because what we do is we have a technical review, so what we typically do is we would send it to town hall, and they would have every permit that's approved. Really, they look at it before it gets approved, so these permits are coming through. So the communication's there, I just think that not everybody knows. Like, there's not multiple people that know that it ends up being, your group knows now, and your group that you hang out with knows, and then your group, how that, it's just a small town, everybody knows, right? Where when I'm just sending it to one person in that town versus a board hearing it, it's a little bit different. So I think that's probably your biggest. I mean, we're not putting a cost on you. I guess the other downfall would be you're not going to be collecting your permit costs. But I don't know what you
Our
heard.
fees are so minimum right now, anyway.
And I would say the majority of people don't actually even worry about getting the permit.
Yeah.
They just do it.
Yeah. Which, that will still happen to some degree. It always will, it always has. And sometimes it won't get caught for a little bit of time, but we have the ability of knowing that it's a problem, and we send Ralph out, and he puts a stop work order out. So Ralph is kind of your extra guy on the ground that you don't currently have now.
What's his last name?
Hoppy,
What is it?
Hoppy. He used to be a contractor, and he just went full time this year for the county, so now he's around everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's still up to you guys. I know that I've talked to the town, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and after explaining there's regulations, their procedures, I have to, by law, enforce this for everyone. I don't get to pick and choose. They were kind of out. They were like, well, we really just wanted it for these couple properties here, this little thing over here. And so once you said that, we're not really interested anymore. But I do think it, in general terms, is really keeping you legal. There's a lot to planning and planning law, and your attorneys don't know planning law. It's a specialty. And so you usually don't have attorneys that know planning law. They can look at it, I can show them, I can say I read it this way, you read it the same way, but they don't know it like I know it.
I think it's just important to really emphasize But we're not, I think there's gonna be a perception that you're giving up all control.
Yeah, and you're not.
But we can address, that's one of the big things we talked about, anything that we want to change can be addressed one way or
Yeah,
another.
and I that's, because that's usually what people assume is like you're losing control. I wouldn't say losing control, maybe all the knowledge that you're getting because they have to come before you or before the planning commission, but, like I said, I would still notify you guys of things, but I think it's really not the control, because even if the planning commission said, like if you guys wanted to bring something forward and the planning commission said, no, there's no way we want that happening, it still comes back to you to say, well, we're gonna pass it.
I think that's a big takeaway.
Yeah,
for
so
the
it still really comes back to you. So I know it's a lot, so in the next few years, I'd say 5 years, you're gonna find things that need change constantly, and you'll probably see me a lot, because there's no way of knowing what things are going to happen and what things we didn't think about when we were writing this. So that it will change, and as you evolve, it'll change from there. And the other thing also is that what I'm gonna do on the comprehensive plan, because we'll have to update that as well, is what we'll do is we'll just take yours right now and put it in our comprehensive plan and just adopt it as the area. And then at some point down the line, what we'll wanna do is do a combined one that actually mingles them together more, but just so that we have it, because we can't put this in place without having that, so. But that's what I plan on doing with the comp plan, is just putting yours with the county one and adopting it as the area. Yeah. And yours is more up to date than ours is, so.
I have a quick question about floodplain administrator.
Oh, yeah.
That's
do
good,
that as
because
well.
I didn't follow through with this, and so,
Yeah,
We're gonna
so
be good
your
with that,
floodplain
right?
ordinance, who do you have, does plan commissioner do floodplain here?
I don't think we currently have one, and I was in the process of taking the course to do it, and you said, no, you don't have
Oh, yeah,
to.
so-
But I wanna make sure, because I will still do it if I need to.
Yeah, so we regulate floodplain, also in our office, we also do addressing, we also we help with valley vacations and stuff like that. We dabble, I always say we dabble because it's literally like the department of, we don't know what to do, what do we do? And we say, oh, I've done this before for this community, maybe we can go that route. But yeah, so we do the floodplain, and our floodplain administrator does take the classes, and does all of that. And currently you're having to update your floodplain ordinance. Have they contacted you yet?
Well, maybe that's what's in this paper, I haven't read it yet.
So
Oh,
DNR,
yeah, actually, that's what this is
yeah, so
about.
DNR's
Yeah.
coming around and,
Check your ordinance.
yep, checking ordinances with you guys. And then how, that will actually be an addendum to this. So how we do that is we regulate it, but we actually do the ordinance and just state that we regulate it in the ordinance. So you adopt it as a town ordinance, county ordinance, whatever. And then we put it as an addendum in our ordinance.
That's really all you need, right? Based on what I've learned
Yeah,
so far.
yeah, and the state basically says these are the things. They will give you a form, or give you an ordinance, a template ordinance, and say, you can or can't, you don't have to do this, you have to do these things, you
Yeah.
could do these things. I would say that if you're going our route, I would keep yours very similar to ours. Because again, we would do an addendum in here, and I'd rather do an addendum they're the same. We just say that, look at ordinance, this is Galveston, look at ordinance, this is county, but this is what both of them say.
Well, you'll let me know if I need to do anything more.
So you will have to, and I probably, one thing is I would just set up a meeting with him to talk about what changes need to happen.
Okay,
Just
okay.
so he knows that you're following through.
Well, there's my FA class, or workshop in January, that we'll probably touch on maybe sometime.
But you're saying
There's-
to contact,
Yeah, because there's
Yeah.
actually someone that will come talk to you about your ordinance and what needs changed.
Okay,
I would do that because
Okay.
they have a deadline in February to do some stuff.
okay.
And so I would go ahead and meet with him and tell him the scenario.
Okay.
And then, like I said, you could go ahead and adopt it in February. I would just try to make sure that both of us are mimicking similar.
Right.
So there's not two floodplain ordinances that we're regulating.
Oh,
There's
geez, no.
one that's similar, so. Yeah, I would meet with them. That way they know that you're in the process of doing the things for me.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was my,
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
Anything else?
well, I learned a lot. I loved all that stuff. I learned a lot.
I think everybody else is like, oh, this is boring. And-
That's why
I
I
get
make
excited
sure to
about
tell you
it.
how much I love it.
But everybody else is like, wow, this is really boring stuff, so.
Okay, no other questions? Then who's on? We're still in an official meeting, so we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.